Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Kristy Taylor, founder of WORxK Solutions LLC, and we are back for the final episode of this special podcast, Drink, Eat, and Intelligent Conversation. I am here with my partner in crime, Dr. Sarah Ratekin, and who the first episode I just kept calling her Ratekin in this whole year, like she's a coupon. But let me turn it over to Sarah, because this has really been a fun experience. Sarah, introduce yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about tonight's topic.
Hey, Kristy, I'm Sarah Ratekin. I am the founder of Happiness is Courage LLC. I'm a huge advocate for positive employee experiences. This has been a ton of fun. And I think tonight's conversation is going to be particularly meaningful because what we're talking about is really bringing it on home and making a lasting impact. So I'm jazzed to see where we take this conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm still laughing. Look, I'm not going to, like, the first two episodes, we tried to pretend like we recorded it on 2 different days, but hey, we recorded this back to back, and we're really having fun, so we're still laughing. Now, when you see this, you're going to see one episode at a time, but it really has been fantastic, right? And so what has been the point of DEI conversations, right? This has been a dynamic series where we have come together as thought leaders and professionals and as change makers. And if you read WORxK Global News, you know that we are committed to highlighting change makers here at WORxK Solutions. We don't just do resumes, contrary to what everybody thinks, that I'm just a resume writer, right? But change makers to explore the complexities and opportunities of fostering an inclusive workplace, because we realize that there are challenges that are being associated with the term DEI. I mean, to even say somebody, to insult somebody and say that they're a DEI hire, right? Like, that is crazy to me, right? But we just said, well, we like to eat. So we're going to, since everybody using acronyms, we are going to drink, eat, and have a good old intelligent conversation. So I still got this same bottle of water that I was drinking.
Coffee.
We got coffee. And I got some cucumbers. and hummus, personal. And so this just is a real laid back atmosphere. Listen, last night, because I got a habit of, you've seen my Facebook post where each night it seems like I'm shopping at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that whole fried pork chop really came from the fried pork chop from the previous episode. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I decided I want a pork chop. So I ordered a whole air fryer. And then, there was the whole thing about me wanting these 48 American cookies, which I'm still disappointed. Listen, guys, I don't know if it was a TikTok, somebody made 48 cookies. Like, remember when you were in school and they had those puzzle piece size, the puzzle piece of the United States? That's what I imagined when I ordered this cookie set, but I should have known because it was like $14, right? I thought I was going to get a continental United States, 48 pieces that I would get to bake, knowing that I can't bake. It was just going to be like a Toll House roll out the dough, and I was going to make 48 cookies. Well, the cookie cutter came, and it was like the size of my hand. I have been going through it. I ordered a whole deep fry to make pork chop, because this is what me shopping at 1 o'clock in the morning. The deep fryer came, and only could fit one pork chop. I can only fry one thing at a time. So I still had the air fryer. So I've been going through it with my cooking, but it's the whole ideology of drink, eat, intelligent conversation, because we're going to snack on this podcast. But anyway, I just wanted to make you laugh. Anyway, this is our last episode, and we are talking about inclusion. We're, like you said, Sarah, we're bringing it all together because we just want to take some of the myth away of these difficult conversations with DEIA and talk about, we've been talking about how, the touchy-feely part is the part that gets politicized, right? When people start going too far into their feelings and it becomes a therapy session, that's the part that people are kind of like exploiting right now. But the most practical part for those of us who actually are doing this work every day, and we have an understanding from an organizational development and HR perspective, I wish that you could just say, boom, everybody's equal, but you still haven't addressed all of the systemic and systematic barriers that got us to the place of inequality in the first place. I mean, I'm only a fabulous 20 years old. But look, no, seriously. I graduated high school, in 2001. What is that, like 24 years ago? When I graduated high school, we were still being bused. Like, literally, the Black kids were being bused to school based on segregation standards to meet a quota. And my class was, I don't even think people knew that was going on. I used to catch the bus in in my hometown, right? Then I could catch the bus at another town where my grandparents lived. two different school districts, but because there was still, but this was 2001. So people just be like, all of a sudden we've overcome. There's still a big old Confederate in my hometown. Like, not in the adjacent town. That was the town I could, both grew up in both towns. But I'm just saying, it's 2025. We got a big old Confederate statue in the middle of the town. So I'm just saying, we've come far, but I mean, we just went
not
from
that far
shopping mall to shopping on, Amazon. So I'm just saying, we still got a ways to go. Just because you say it's gone, you're not David Copperfield. Okay, racism and sexism and all that stuff still exists. But we want to take the conversation beyond that to, okay, let's say you decide you're going to reframe DEI and call it organizational code, whatever you call it. The principles are still there. Now, I'm still calling it DEI, but whatever your organization call it in any shape or form, the whole point is that the principles of DEI, we talk about inclusive work environments, fostering environments where people feel actually happy and productive in the workplace. That you can't really separate that from DEI, but if you want to, you can try. But all of that still stands. So this is what we're talking about tonight when we, in this final episode, we discuss really how to embed these values in organizational culture and some actionable steps to take measurable, to explore and maintain that momentum. And I'm going to kick this off to you because my question is about metrics to you, Sarah, but I love what you said in the previous episode where it's like, look, you can't just set a quote and be like, we need 3 Black people, 2 white people, 3 women. And then, my all-time favorite when people approach me is like, you're the perfect person because you're a veteran, you're a Black, and you're a woman. Can I have you to fill this role? Absolutely not. Not, So, when you talk about metrics in workplace happiness, what metrics should organizations be tracking when it comes to inclusion and happiness efforts to ensure that they're effective?
I mean, I think they should do spinal taps and blood samples. No, I'm just kidding. But you can't actually measure any of this stuff that way, right? So I wish it'd be a heck of a lot easier. When I think about the metrics that organizations can reasonably implement to track their progress in creating a more diverse and inclusive space, things that come to mind are retention rates by demographics. Like, what does your landscape look like for your organization, and are you retaining your different demographics of humans in roughly the same ratio? That's a great way to start the conversation. If you aren't tracking turnover, you ought to be. Just have a stiff drink and a couple of Kleenex handy because it's probably pretty miserable. Also, what does the engagement look like when it comes to these kinds of programs that you're putting in place in your company? It's one thing to say, we talked about this in the previous episode, we hosted a workshop, cool. First of all, that won't fix all your problems. But if you are having programming that is wrapped around these kinds of topics, are people attending? Are they implementing the strategies that you're teaching them? Are they using those skills? You can track that in various ways. What does your employee net promoter score look like? Would your employees recommend your company to their friends and classmates and peers? Are you doing pulse surveys to check on the sentiment in specific areas of your organization? What does your absenteeism look like? Absenteeism is a hidden gem. We don't really have great benefits as a country when it comes to like sick days, but people will take their sick days for mental health days if you don't offer those as a benefit. So that's a great way to kind of start to see what's going on, and you can track that longitudinally. And then I think about things like the business outcomes. Like, what does your performance of your teams look like? Do people feel like are they innovative? Are they creative? Are they bringing new ideas to the table? These aren't the typical business outcomes of how many widgets did you manufacture, but it's really like an innovation tracker. How many new ideas are being brought forward to our leadership teams? How many new products are being suggested? I mean, it depends on what you do as a company, but looking at the way your organization is evolving can be a way to track these initiatives. But a piece of that is really kind of how you do this work. How are you embedding this work in your organization? And I think we've both seen it. Anybody who's in this space has seen it. You get a new leader and they bring in a whole new slate of programming because they want to put their thumbprint on it. Mm-hmm. And That's problematic for about a gajillion reasons. So, how, instead of doing that, how can leaders look at this to really keep these initiatives front of mind rather than sort of evaporating after the first kickoff meeting or the first couple of weeks?
What a great question. I have to watch what's in my head. Listen, if you come into a organization,
and I was like, let me softball this to you.
Listen, if you just coming into an organization, you may not want to make 400 changes on the first day. But listen, it's important. It's important to listen. Like, you know, everybody, you know, you see the new leader, they come in and they go, I'm going to do a listening tour. Hey, guess what? Why don't you actually do that and listen? Okay. You have people there that can like really help you to integrate yourself. So one thing I say is like, you know, be focused on integrate initiatives into your organizational framework. But a lot of that is like also relying on the expertise of the people who've been there. Now, I get it. As a leader, you have to read the room. You have to get to know people because, you know, just because somebody been there a long time, it doesn't necessarily make them an ace in the hole, because you have sometimes people have just been there and they just there, like literally probably dead weight. You got to pay attention to that, right? But also even listen to the people who haven't been there as long, because they can give you some insight and ideas. Because I like when you're talking about managing different generations or bringing in people with different perspectives and experiences, they can, when you talk about leading change and innovation in your organization, they can really serve as the root and catalyst for that, right? So one thing, because this is all about inclusion, again, we're looking at inclusion and the concept of inclusion outside of like just that thing that has really been politicized. We're looking at it as like, okay, generationally, experience-wise. I mean, yes, race and all that stuff is important. We ain't gonna forget. I'm not gonna just like look over that, you know, in terms of like diversity. But we're talking about making happiness and inclusion a part of your everyday. It has to be included in your core values. But that, don't forget, like that young person that's out of these kids out here making millions of dollars on TikTok. And do you know what kind of ask me to edit something on Canva? Okay, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. I didn't panic when TikTok shut down because I don't know how to use it. Okay, I'm in my, but like the skills and the things that these young people are doing, that's project management. That's technology. You know, setting measurable goals and demonstrate it as a leader, that commitment. Like, don't just come in and be like, well, you know, I'm going to do a 90-day listening tour. I think that's great to maybe listen first, right? Okay. But actually listen and then work with the people who have given you valuable input to identify those gaps, solve and work on solving problems, and then continue to be engaged in the process. Like, don't lead by command, like just putting stuff out there. Like, I have to watch that with myself, because I will be like, I need this, and this done. But like, rely on the expert, because, you know, from a military perspective, I've been trained to, it's the opposite of me, actually, because I'm gonna be like, boom, 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 we need to get this done, right? But military perspective is like, yes, you give orders, but also you have people who are experts in what they're doing. You need to rely on the leadership and expertise of those people to allow them to do their jobs and push the change and champion it, because they're the people that are working on the front lines. And then the last thing I'm going to say is, you know, focus on long-term culture change, not just the Band-Aid. You know, training, as we said, is not always the solution. It's the Band-Aid. Well, I got a good idea. Why don't we do a training on this? No, you actually have to embed it as a part of your culture. And that starts by you actually leading and relying on the expertise of the folks who've been around and in that organization. But then also the decategorization process that I talked about in our first episode, based on that framework, right? Where it's like you have to set policies and clear expectations of what you want, because all of those things, in order to achieve all of those metrics, because I guarantee you, if people start looking at their turnover rates, you know, that's and don't get turnover rates confused with the folks who are just here because they're trying to survive because they need a job, right? Because your turnover rates, if you have truly high engagement rates, then you're going to also have high employee sustainability rates, right? Your employees are not leaving. It's a difference between, oh, well, we only have 2% turnover. Well, that's because rent is $3,000 million and people need a job, right? Yeah. And we, as people who are in this workspace, or just, the everyday person, you should be asking more of your job than for you to survive. And you know what I mean? Well, I'm just grateful I have a job. Well, yes, I'm grateful, but I would like a little bit of respect as a human. All right, so I gave my soapbox spiel because and because you gave this great thing on metrics, right? And Sarah, you do this work, and it's in your title. Like with me, when people say my business name, I get everything from work, RX, even though the RX ain't even on the end of work, or just work. But your business title is so clear that happiness is courage. It takes courage for us to come to a podcast and do this and talk about it. It is so clear. So when you go into an organization, it's like, how do you help these organizations embed? Because remember, I said training is not always the answer, right? How do you help these organizations embed these initiatives into their long-term culture and their strategy?
I mean, I think I want to hit that point again. Training will not solve all of your problems. If it did, we wouldn't still have sexual harassment in the workplace, because every company on the planet has mandatory sexual harassment training. And yet, weirdly enough, it's still happening. I wonder why. Because there's not a culture of accountability. So when I think about ways that organizations can truly embed these pieces of the puzzle into their organizational culture, the first thing that I want to see, and I need to see from an organization, is actual leadership commitment. And when I say leadership commitment, I'm not saying that the C-suite signs off on the initiative. I'm saying that the senior leadership commits to being part and parcel of the change process. I have spent many, many, many hours in conversations with senior leaders who want to bring in a training session or even a long-term initiative, but they themselves are too busy to be part of the conversation. If senior leadership is not going to commit to the change, then the change is not going to happen, because they set the tone for everybody else. So the first thing is leadership commitment has to be on the table. That's bare minimum. I think another piece of this conversation is, how are you aligning these initiatives with organizational values? I mean, everybody who goes to business school hears about the Enron values and the debacle that was. They had the words on the wall, but they didn't live into those values. I don't really care what the values of a company actually are, but how are those being lived out? And are you including these cultural components into those values? So you can have trust and value and customer centricity as your values, but what are you doing when it comes to inclusivity in your workplace, or respect for your employees, not just your customers, but also your employees? That's a conversation that needs to happen as well. And then what are the systems that you're creating to help support this pretty radical change process? One of the easy ways that people can do this is to establish employee resource groups, whatever they're called in your organization. I've heard them called inclusion councils. I've heard them called diversity networks. It doesn't really matter what language you use, but how are you creating a structure within your company that can help bolster the conversation, can speak to the various different aspects of diversity and inclusion, and frankly, carry a little bit of the labor, because it is a lot of work to do this. So give people who are experts in their own lived experience the positional authority to speak to that and how it intersects with your organization. I had a client one time who told me, we don't need employee resource groups because we believe that all of our employees are important. What they really meant was, we don't think any of our employees are important, and we don't want to have to acknowledge that anybody is bringing a different lived experience. And their turnover rate was 177% annually.
Awesome. That was very high. I mean, because the higher you go in turnover, that means that you're really doing something.
That means on average, they were replacing everybody almost twice a year, right? I mean, it was
People forget insane. When you have turnover rates. When you have mass layoffs and turnover rates, that you're going to have to, again, spend money to recruit, which is often like 2 or 3 times the person's salary that you're spending to recruit and retrain.
It was ugly.
That's a whole nother topic of actual HR stuff. right? That we can go a whole nother podcast on.
Oh
right?
man, it was nasty. It was nasty. But I mean, the leadership wasn't willing to have that conversation. They weren't willing to put the rubber on the road. So those are the kinds of systems that you can put in place, and it shares the labor. I think that's a big piece of this. I say that leaders have a big part in this as far as accountability goes, but the reality is everybody has a piece of this. So create as many avenues for people to get engaged with the work of inclusion as possible. Because I think the other piece of this is I often see that the general individual contributor, if the company doesn't have a good space that's already inclusive, they're kind of hanging back, waiting to see what leadership is going to do about it. And that's cool when it comes to setting the tone, but everybody has to be pulling their weight. So what is the responsibility of the individual employee versus the responsibility of the leadership members? I think those are two different bodies of work, but they both have to come to fruition at the same time for actual sustainable change to happen. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And then the employees roll their eyes and say, see, leadership doesn't care. Meanwhile, leadership's like, to heck with you guys. We spent all this time and often money trying to fix a problem. So we're not going to do that anymore. And everybody loses. So create the space, hold the accountability, and make sure it's aligned with your values and that it's a piece, part and parcel of your actual organizational values. And then you have some opportunity for it to actually work. I think speaking of values, though, that's a touchy conversation, right? So when you work with clients, how do you help them align personal and organizational values so that there can really be that lasting impact when it comes to these kinds of conversations?
You know how I typically get into an organization, Sarah, that it starts with, I want a workshop. That's how usually I come into an organization. Believe it or not, just in there. And listen, I want to make sure I say this for those who are listening to our podcast and you go, yes, that's why we don't need DEI because it's just training. No, that you're missing the point. If it was just training, then that's a problem, right? It has to be culture, but not an over the top culture of, it has to be a culture that focuses on inclusion. Yes, we may have some baseline training. Maybe you do a CBT or something just to kind of get everybody to set the stage of here's what the expectations are in terms of how you're going to interact with other people in our company. But that decategorization process is we actually have ground rules and expectations and parameters in place, right, for how we manage this process. Because it'll be somebody that listen in to us and go, yeah, that's exactly why we removed it. No, that's because you probably was only doing training anyway that wasn't actually embedded in your culture if you was actually so quick to jump off the train with it. Is to your point, I mean, leaders have to really lead. So we talk about this process of like celebrating the small wins and keeping the team motivated. You need to know who you are, because we talked about so much about this, right? We need to really be clear on what our organization's values are. We need to be clear on who we are, what we stand for. We need to, as leaders, I mean, I like to use that trickle down effect, right? But we can't help the individuals in our organizations get to that level of self-actualization. Because, okay, look at the hierarchy of needs from an organizational team level, right? Our goal is to try to, as a team, to get to the point of self-actualization. And so we need to just be clear on what our team values are. Then that comes with understanding ourselves, understand our organizational values, because when we are engaged as leaders, when we're aligned with our mission, when we're aligned with the vision of the organization, then we can actually move from this stagnant point into action. And then that's where, when you start to see the results, that's where you're going to actually be able to, when we're celebrating them small wins, that's where we're going to actually be able to say, look, like we're moving. Are you familiar with, I have so many certifications that I forget. It'll come to me, but the certificate, it's a training. I have to look it up. It's a training certification where it's like, basically you go in and we're looking at the overall framework. Oh, the Kirkpatrick model.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so in Kirkpatrick, how everybody's solution typically is let's do the training, but Kirkpatrick is like the level 4 focuses on like the big picture, right? But it's all those little things that we're doing to get to the big picture. We're looking for a big solution that's tied to the overall mission and all the things that we're doing to get there. That's how we celebrate. Now, along the way, along with this celebration, though, you're going to be seeking, because we're trying to embed this into the culture. And that goes to Cotter's 8-step process, where he's like, seeking feedback and growth. But we want to make a lasting impact. So this is where we are. And I think I probably answered the wrong question, but this is where we are, embedding this within our culture. Yeah, I think that's what I did, because I'm talking about celebrating small wins. But hey, it's all the same discussion. Because when you talk about, embedding these initiatives for the long-term impact, it is literally, what I'm saying is that from an organizational standpoint, you want the team to reach a point of self-actualization. And the way that you do that is through personal accountability. It is through celebrating those small wins, aligning what you're doing with the mission. And then that strategy of really embedding it in the culture is where you focus on that process of continuous process improvement, right? All right. So, since I done jumped the gun here, you can go back and ask me question, any question in the end, but I'm still going to throw one out here to you, which is, I always ask you to share examples. It seems like every podcast, like share an example. But yeah, for me, it always starts with because I always say that I'm a workshop facilitator, right? So even though I'm saying training, it's not usually they bring me in as the trainer. And then when I listen to them, then it starts to turn into, oh, we need some coaching. We need somebody to help us put some policies in place. So when you go out there and you're doing this work, in terms of embedding into the culture, like I just said, we can really wrap up there. And then you can take this as the last question, right? How do you make this inclusivity and joyful culture, especially when everybody tired of change? They tired of hearing the buzzwords. They don't want to hear about drink, eat, and intelligent conversations. How do you embed that within the culture?
I think there has to be an acknowledgement that work doesn't have to suck. And when work doesn't suck, when people actually are enjoying the work that they're doing, I don't mean they're having a party every day, but I mean they're actually excited to come to work. They're excited to problem solve, that the company is going to really take off and thrive in those spaces. And when that acknowledgement happens, it changes everything about how we do work. So how are we looking at happiness in the workplace? There are lots of ways to do that, right? I see companies do things like do pulse surveys, or I know there are a couple of different software tools out there that allow you to do anonymous real-time listening to employee sentiment. That's a great way to see how are things going sometimes. And I want to put a caveat here. There are times in life when people really should not be happy. And if they are, there's probably something going on, right? So if you've just done a mass layoff and your retained employees seem a little unhappy, well, no kidding. They're all afraid right now. That's normal. But if you're in the normal course of business, like, are you paying attention? Are your leaders trained to pay attention to the sentiment of people around them? Do you have the workplace policies that allow inclusion to even exist, right? And you have policies and programs like flexible work hours, enhanced parental leave? Do you have mentorship programs to close some of those gaps for underrepresented groups that are traditionally behind the 8 ball when it comes to career growth? What's your recognition policy look like? Is it always the sales team getting the awards, or do you have an equitable recognition program that rewards people for being intentional about how they approach the work in their different departments? And really, how is this part of the way that you do work? I think it's just as much as is it the language? Does the language even exist in your workplace? When the model of success is angry, and it's how you have to be angry to be winning at work, then you're not going to have a happy workplace, and that's just real. How else can you approach the conversation? How else can you frame success? It doesn't always have to be about squashing the competition. I mean, you and I are both military, and I'm just astonished by how much straight up pseudo combat language is used in corporate environments. Like, come on, you are not really doing reconnaissance missions into, I mean, come on. That's not what's happening. And nobody has anybody 6 in the corporate setting. Like, stop. Like, just stop. for lots of reasons. And so like, how do you change, like neuro-linguistic programming is real. The words that we use shape the realities that we have. I'm not saying you can't be competitive with your business, but if you're just looking to crush everybody around you, then that's the culture that you're creating. And if that's what you want, that is fine. But don't be surprised when you're not attracting top talent.
So much to say with that, but okay.
And I mean, yeah, there are so many ways to get there that don't necessarily have to be like the Lord of the Flies approach. I used that before, but I think that's a really great metaphor. I think we don't have to try to win by killing off everybody else in the business. I mean, that's ridiculous, and it doesn't suit anybody well.
It reminds me of that movie Trolls. Remember the one guy who was like the peace-loving troll that did all of the meditation, and then come to find out he was the one trying to kill everybody off and crush the competition, right? We see people like that.
Don't judge a book by its cover, right? So Kristy, I'm curious. We've talked about lots and lots and lots of different ways to think about inclusion and to incorporate it and to approach the topic in the workplace to make it more sustainable. What are the red flags? What are the red flags that you watch for when you step into these spaces and you're working with a client? Like, what are the things that tell you that a different conversation needs to happen?
Yeah, if you're telling me everything perfect. One, right? Everybody just look, and you know, I mean, I know that people make memes about it, like people make memes about this stuff. Listen, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I've had all of this stuff like a clothing brand. It was unsuccessful and all that. But one of the things that really happened to us last year was like all the good advice that I offer every day. It was on our Careerhood memes account where we post sarcastic stuff. Like 2 of the posts went viral, like 11 million views from just like all the, you know, sarcastic people things they were. And then there's like always this thing where people go like, we're a family. Like that's so cliche, but when you say it, like I just know the fact that you have to tell me that, and you know, and then as you start talking, because first of all, when people come to you, I think it's even relevant for coaching too in general, right? When people come to you, the issue is never the real issue. It's never what they come to you for. You have to peel back the pieces of that banana. So, you know, I'm paying attention to red flags, like the red flag, the facade of perfectionism. Yeah, we just all get along and it's so great. And I'm telling you, because I went in to do a workshop one time and it was just like, yeah, I just want everybody to work together. Kumbaya. We get in there and they start talking. That was one of them instances where I was just like, I think y'all need more than a workshop. You need to, you know, do a little intervention and coaching here. But I'm glad that they felt comfortable in that space, right? Because I always go in with the standpoint of focusing on the core things, what I do at WORxK Solutions, which is resiliency building and you know, like I go in and with that. That's like all this, but it's just, you know, listening to them. Or, you know, but sometimes the red flags really are hot orange, purple, and green. When you go in and you're listening and it's like, it's so clear that there's not any type of structure or there needs to be some policies or strategy in place. Because you're like, we're having meetings for the meetings just because we're meeting. Right. And this is, you know, so it's paying attention to those things like that. But I'm going to tell you, as a coach, you're not going to always know. But as coaches, we are perceptive. You're not going to know right away, but we are pretty perceptive. So when we go in and even sometimes that's why we always do, like, I don't know with you, but I'm sure you do. You always do like that initial consultation, because that right there is going to allow you to have some little get a perspective. But then also maybe you do like a little kind of cold outreach and feedback to the staff. Preliminary to get some input. It's always going to be that one staff member that wants to keep it real, too real, but you need them or you'll never really know what's going on in the organization, right? And you know, for military, they do like, we remember like back in the day, because I'm like, when they would do these IG inspections and stuff like that, and it would be that one, you know, it was just, you kind of need that in a way because it's an accountability system. But yeah, when you're telling me it's too perfect, we're all a family, or so it can be like that extreme, or then when you go to the other extreme of like, it's not even red flags. It's like burning. Like you ask, and sometimes, and I don't even know if this has happened to you, but sometimes when you're engaging, and even when you're like going through the process of building out the the contracting period, right? You're building up to what's about to happen, and just the way like they manage the process and engage with you as a coach, right? And you can kind of see like people disagreeing or even like going back and forth in emails or delays, denial, trial, the tribulation. You're like, okay, this is gonna be something. This is gonna be something. But yeah, that's really look. This really has been a fantastic experience. I think it's a conversation. It's a set of conversations that are needed from people who are really in this space doing this work, because we didn't come in with some perspective like it's all hunky-dory and you can just train and you can just do a DEI class and then that's going to solve the problem. No, we really spoke from this topic from a real perspective of like, no, this is what it is and this is what it ain't, right? And if you go in and you take the extreme on any end and you politicize that and you use it as justification of what can and cannot, what shouldn't be, and social issues that compel us, that impact us before we even get to a work environment, then that's kind of where we find some challenges. So I think just we're kind of centered and rational in the middle of like, as people who do this work, it's like we understand this is both. It can be extreme, people extremely sensitive or extremely over the top. But I think it's great to address it and just understand how that the topic of diversity is diverse. It is not just a one thing, just centered on one specific area, but it impacts all areas of your organization, include how you function, all those human resources factors, human capital and talent management factors that apply. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Sarah, for the last word. It's not going to be the last time you see Sarah because we're going to feature her in Work Global News Magazine as one of our change makers in an upcoming issue. But what are your final thoughts, Sarah?
I find it super helpful in these kinds of spaces to remember that this work is messy because we're dealing with humans, and humans are wild, woolly, weird, and very diverse. I mean that in all the ways you can possibly imagine, and so many we haven't even figured out yet. So I hope people are not discouraged. I know there's a lot of conversations around this topic, but this is a really important conversation to keep going, because we will always be learning more in this space. And so keep the curiosity front of mind. And I don't, like you said, I don't care what you call it, but keep the curiosity. And I think that will get you most of where you need to be, most of the way to where you need to be. So thanks for holding the space for this conversation, Kristy. Super appreciate it.
I'm thankful for people like you who, hey, we don't understand every single dynamic about each other. We never met in person, but we just get it. And we understand that, we can have a conversation with each other and collaborate on a topic that needs further discussion, right? Not being emotionally led, but actually literally sitting here eating snacks and just talking about it and how it impacts the workplace, right? Because we know that these things don't exist within a monolith. We know that training is not the answer to everything, but if you're using training as your Band-Aid, then you got much bigger problems in your organization if that's what your solution to everything is. But we want to keep this conversation going. We encourage you to drink, eat, and continue to have it. Now drink water. Now we drink water and coffee. Now we don't drink. We're not on here as professionals drinking bottles of liquor. Okay, but drink, eat, and continue to have intelligent conversations around this topic because it impacts you in your work environment. As employers, your employees deserve to be respected and treated like human beings that they are. I wish that I could sell you the facade that everybody comes from the same experience, so that the playing field is immediately equal when people walk. You may be offering an equitable opportunity, right? But you still having a deal. You still have to do it with the framework, a cultural competent framework of everybody's equal. Because if that was, I can start a whole nother conversation on. If that was the case, what if you have somebody with 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience, but then you have a fresh college graduate? You know what I mean? Or, so who has all of these others? So what's really the answer? But anyway, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned. We got a lot of work to do and continue conversation in this space. I'm gonna still call it DEI because my mama called it DEI. But whatever you call it, the work still needs to be done, and we encourage you to stay encouraged and inspired and motivated to do it. Thanks for tuning in to this series. Thank you, Sarah. You can check Sarah out on her website. Give us your website, Sarah.
It's happinessiscourage.com.
Right. We want you to be happy. It takes courage. And you can find me on WORxK Solutions. I'm dropping a new podcast daily, or I try to do it every other day when I'm not sleepy. Prescription for Career Success. We have our summit coming up in April, which is a whole big thing that we're doing, helping people write the prescription for career success. And I guess I should turn it over to you, Sarah, for one final plug of anything you got coming up.
I'm just trying to tread water in this crazy world that we find ourselves in. So yeah, stay tuned.
All right. This has been fantastic. We encourage you to keep doing the work, and happiness is courage. Have a good night.